Okay, update on the prototype printed AR. It has finally broken. Um, so we've got, I didn't count. Um, we probably put about 100 rounds through it today. So total round count is probably around 250. 200 to 250 range, which is not bad for a first prototype. So we're going to go over the breakdown of what broke down. All right, so first we have our lower failure points observed are the rear takedown lug split, um, the stock design with the metal reinforcings and such. That was actually just fine. And I think increasing the thicknesses the of the material here on the buffer tower would alleviate this problem. Um, Further, what ended up happening is we also had similar failures on the front, and the whole lower kind of slid down just a little bit. So if you can see, the bolt carrier was not lined up correctly with the buffer tube, and it impacted here and made quite the indention right there, where that was flat before. So it beat the hell out of that. Further, we have the front takedown lug also broke. It also failed. It split along the layer lines, which is pretty much expected for a printed failure. And it was not super thick to begin with. So if you can see kind of the thickness that we have off of this face, it was roughly that thickness all the way around, and it was about 14 millimeters, about 14 millimeters in width. So just increasing that profile significantly should alleviate that, and increasing the thickness back here, leading up to the buffer tower where our takedown pin goes. So whole thing is kind of flexed a little bit like that. It's kind of bent. Another failure that was noted is the trigger at certain points was failing to reset. So I don't know what the hell's going on with that. That may actually be a problem with the relatively inexpensive trigger I purchased. Okay, well, I have no idea what's wrong with that. Why is it firing? Oh, it's a binary trigger, clearly. This is clearly a prototype binary trigger. That's what's going on. Yeah, no, not at all. That's going to require some further deep dive to figure out what the fuck is going on there. Because it was not exhibiting... It was not exhibiting that behavior on the range. As far as I can tell, it looks like the trigger pin may have widened a little bit, but the trigger pin isn't walking. So the angles and the dimensions might be slightly off there to a degree. Yeah, whatever. What the fuck? Something just fell out of it. Whatever. Fuck it. Something fell out of it. I will say, so, like, I mean, safety, last round hold open mag catch, that all worked fine. Those are relatively low stress components. As with most printed lowers, it failed around the buffer tube where there's this transition, and because this has to withstand all of the force of the recoil being absorbed into the stock. And while this area is definitely overbuilt, to alleviate that problem, this area is much thinner. So we get what we expect. Yeah. I don't know what the heck's going on with that trigger. I'm gonna have to tear down the fire control group. But there'll be time for that. All right, upper. So currently, there is definitely some barrel wobble, as seen. So on initial assembly, first time I even tried to put this together, the rear takedown lug broke. You can see that what's left of it, that profile was very small. Needs to be a lot beefier, obviously. So, you know, solution is fairly obvious, and that's why in all of the actual test firing there was a zip tie in place. Makes sense. And now we have a similar cracking failure on the front. Actually, I'm only just seeing it now because of the camera angle, but it is actually split on both sides. There we go. I'm going to grab my tool and take this handguard off. Alright, handguard teardown. Get this very high-tech long screwdriver extension. Just unthread that long rod and then drop your tools on the ground. Okay, that should be sufficient. Should be able to pull that out now. Alright, one of them definitely clear. Get a punch, knock that out. Get something small. Allen wrench probably will do the job. But that one's out too, regardless. There we go. Okay, what do we have up here? Alright, that's interesting. Okay, so handguard has the threaded rods, obviously. We got that mostly torn down. Throw that over there. Okay, so on the barrel mounting, we had a fracture along the layer lines, as one would expect, of this portion. And so the top barrel cross pin came out. So the top barrel cross pin is no longer properly aligned. So we can just unthread that. That's not actually coming out, trying to unthread it. So let's just pull the bitch. Find my... There we go. Cross pin's out. Yeah, that was barely even being retained. The bottom one is held in place by an actual nut. Okay, so again we can see the actual takedown lugs fractured. They lasted a lot longer than some of the other ones. They did pretty well, but definitely going to beef that up for version 2. Unthread this. cross pin. I'm about to try to find my freaking drill. Get the bitch out of there a little faster. There we go. Cross pin's out. As expected, what we have on the cross pin is, let's see if I can get her to focus. Okay, it's not really going to focus, but on this cross pin, what we have is it's just an M4 bolt. It's threaded right here, and on this section, it actually runs into the much harder steel of the barrel, and so the threads actually get sheared off. So, okay, that's that. Let's see if we can unmount the barrel. There we go. Okay. So there was a stainless steel shimming material that was attempted to be used. Looks like it was partially successful. Some of it bunched up. I did have to beat the barrel into the receiver in order to get it to mount. And that was done in an attempt to prevent the side-to-side wobble. But clearly the two cross pins mounted into the plastic is an insufficient mounting mechanism. Let's see. I can get this red dot off if I can find my little tool on the horrendous clusterfuck that is my desk. Found a tool that'll work. Get that red dot off of there. It is a counterfeit red dot, but it does mostly function. Might put this on my 50. That'd be fun. While I wait to fabricate the version 2 of the printed AR. There we go. Dot. Anyway. So let's take a look at the rest of the upper. Got a pin around here somewhere real small that I can use to punch that little piece out. So as we can see here, the threaded rods for the handguard thread into these, if I can get them out, 1/4-inch threaded inserts. There are holes drilled in the upper. I mean, this thing's jacked anyway, so I'll just break this piece of material off, and then just bitch. Yeah, it just does not want to come out of there. I'll get it out sooner or later. Maybe not right now. There we go. Got it. Okay, yeah, that area was damaged a little bit. Looks like back here we had some additional layer line cracking. Not sure what caused that. I might have had the screw, the threaded rod tightened a little too much. It's hard to say. Otherwise, this upper is in pretty good shape. One noted failure. All right, I don't know where the hell those parts are. Anyway, one noted failure is the charging handle has the charging handle latch. There was a small nub printed into the upper that it was supposed to interface with. Right at the end of printing, right whenever I called testing, whenever I called the test, that little latch failed. So as I have the rifle up, bam, bolt carrier comes back, and the charging handle was no longer locking in, so it actually popped me in the nose twice. Had to do it twice. Make sure I learned the correct lesson from my mistake. Yeah, so that's pretty much the entire upper torn down. I'm not going to go into a super in-depth tear down of the lower. I understand the failures there a little better. The plan will be, with this upper, I'm going to rework my barrel mounting system, and what the plan will be is kind of like a barrel nut, more like a traditional AR. But I'll have 1/4 inch threaded rods that the handguard is already riding on, and I'll have nuts on those and crossbars, probably 2 crossbars, one on top, one on bottom, and those will torque into the upper itself. The handguard will have to be reworked. I'm going to have to make some cavities kind of in this area, maybe bulge it out a little bit, I don't know yet, in order to accept that. So there'll definitely be some rework. On the bright side, as you can see, our aluminum tube that actually mounts our barrel is recessed a fair bit into this printed area, and that is just so that the cross pins through the plastic can be mounted. Clearly that is an inferior system, and I have another design in the works right now that was going to reuse that same system in a .308 caliber, so that is going to be scrapped as well and reworked. Not the whole design, but that part of the design will be reworked. So the aluminum tube in here worked really well. I'm really happy with how that came out. It is unfortunately JB welded into here, so I don't know if I'll actually be able to get it out. I'm thinking fire, torch the plastic off, but we'll have to see. The JB weld may not be all that tight, actually. I might be able to actually remove this piece. Hard to say. There's probably some areas where the JB weld yeah, it's already sliding forward just a little bit. Yeah, I should be able to remove this thing, so good to know. The JB weld may not be sufficient for actually mounting the aluminum tube. However, it didn't actually cause any problems until I actively tried to beat it out. Okay, let's see if I can get this out of there. Yeah, it's definitely gonna come on out. So that's actually kind of a good thing for rebuilds. Maybe not for the actual functional product. All right, yeah, I think with sufficient persuasion I can get that out of there. All right, got the aluminum tube out. It's more than a little beat up. May or may not have had some bending. And frankly, I did make some mistakes whenever I was doing the actual initial milling on this, so it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if I have to fabricate a new one. Not the most difficult process, and it gives me an excuse to buy a new Dremel, because I need one of those anyway. So, what I'm seeing on here, the JB Weld, we actually got really good saturation on all the different surfaces. it's probably difficult to see, but there's JB Weld all over the interior surface of this. There's definitely JB Weld all over the inner surface of this. I am wondering if the particular, it's this stuff, which is plastic weld. So I would imagine that would be good for plastic. May not be the best for aluminum, but it seems to have bonded pretty well to the aluminum and not so well to the plastic. Could try some stronger shit. Who knows? But also, I don't know if JB Weld is really supposed to be bonding 3D printed plastic to relatively smooth aluminum under repeated shock loadings of, 556. So shock loadings generally don't, adhesives generally don't perform well under repeated shock loadings. They have a tendency to fatigue. Though I would think that given the layer lines nature of a 3D printed component, that adhesives, glues, and epoxies would do really well for those sorts of materials, because as you can see, probably, maybe, don't know. Yeah, you can kind of see the layer lines there. Layer lines give you little grooves that the adhesive can, move into. So it's sort of like roughing it up with sandpaper. So on accuracy, shootability, everything else, recoil was mild. And once I got it zeroed at 25, even with the failures of the upper mounting pin, it still held zero. I was still able to make hits at 50 yards. Now, of course, I didn't have a great zero, so at 50 yards, on an 8 by 8 inch square plate, I had to hold like a foot and a half, like a foot high and a foot left to make a hit. But we did like a really crummy zero at 10 yards. So once I found my zero, I was able to consistently hit even up to the end of it whenever it was no longer cycling properly, because the takedown lugs had failed, and so they were it was no longer holding the upper and the lower together properly, and it was causing it to have double feeds. So consistent double feeds. But yep. Let's see. What else can I say? This section I'm going to modify, because on a typical AR, there's a little tab that comes back here that kind of covers up the top of the charging handle, and that broke off almost immediately, so I'll just scrap that from the design entirely. And the little lug that the charging handle hooks onto, I will probably drill a hole and put a piece of like 1/8 round bar in there as a replacement, because the plastic held up decently well, but it did eventually fail, and then I got bonked in the nose with the charging handle. So there is a little bit of melting here where the gas tube was, and I know I got this thing hot for sure. So a little bit of melting there, which is not the worst thing in the world. It held up really well, and that gas tube gets hot for sure. In previous tests, I did 2 or 3 mags in a row, about as fast as I could go, and it still never melted. It never got soft, in this area. It didn't build up enough heat for that. There's a fair bit of material here. So I would call this, this is of course just the first prototype, and I would say we have more successes than failures at this stage of the game. So time for version 2.